Well, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all of the intros this morning from Carl about what we're going to talk about. My role at Epsilon, I'm not going to give an intro on Epsilon again, you heard that, but my role is really an interesting one. I'm part of how we bring all of our solutions together for different clients. So we have probably dozens of different product lines. And what's really critical for us when we go to market is to actually know what a given customer is trying to do. And then I try and make sure that we bring the right things to it, right? So that we're not just sitting and pushing product. And that's a lot of where the genesis of our value realization framework came in. It's because we see a lot of customers, and you'll see this in the deck, who buy into Adobe for all of the good reasons, right? Everything that's a promise. But it's sort of like you're given a really good car, but you're not given a mechanic. You're not necessarily told where the roads are. You're said, here are the keys, go. And you're not even really sure what the where you're going to end up. And because we've done hundreds and hundreds of these types of projects, we're kind of sharing what we do. And that's what this is all about. And so feel free to ask questions during it and certainly afterwards. Like I said, we work a lot with Adobe. So you'll hear in here some criticisms perhaps, but it's not about the company itself. It's not necessarily about the software itself, right? It's that it really is very complex. And doing it right is really complex. And externalizing the right things so you can do the right things for marketing in the business is complex. And that's where it comes from. Epsilon, because we offer a variety of different services, we're not just a systems integrator, right? Our legacy comes out of data. We then got into direct marketing, and then we began realizing that in order to serve customers, we needed to have all of these things brought together. And so what we really get to do is we get to take an outside-in perspective as well as an inside-out perspective. Meaning we know what you're trying to accomplish, or at least we're going to delve into what you're trying to accomplish or a client's trying to accomplish and bring that back to, well, then what do we need the software to be able to do? And then what do we need the people and the processes to be? So, like I said, we believe that they're the leader, right? There are lots of choices people have, but they are clearly, they get it. We get their vision, we want it, we know where they focus, we share a lot of customers, and we have a really long and valuable relationship with them. And so take that into account as we're going through this. But one of the things that we see is a situation where this happens all the time, right? What do we hear when we go in to talk to clients? Sometimes it's inside out. Well, I'm going to buy the software, then I'll figure it out. Anyone have their organization do that? Right? We're going to commit to the software, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. Another one is top down. Our execs decided that we're going to have a commitment to Adobe, so go make it happen. That happened? Yeah. We're just stuck, right? So we got this great set of tools, and we started to put the thing together, and we don't know where to go next, because those little IKEA instructions, they got lost. Right? So we've got all these pieces and parts, and there aren't enough of them, and we don't know where to get replacements, and we broke one of them, and what do we do? And then we get clients who say, yeah, we thought we knew what we were doing, but we just needed to make it work better, right? We just reached this situation where we need to be able to contact users in a different way, and we don't know how to do that. Or we need the website to be able to present something, and we've got two different teams that are trying to get things presented, and we can't do it. Could you just fix it? We hear all of these, right? But the bigger thing that we get is that we see these problems around the industry. So if you're feeling these, don't worry, you're not unique. We see way too much software, right? Where companies have bought a lot of software, and in a lot of cases they're being, told to use it, but they're not getting any return on it, right? You might as well have just tried to launch your website on Wix as, try and use something like Adobe Experience Manager, right? This never happens, right? Buy the enterprise license now, we'll give you a good deal. And then you're stuck, right? And you're realizing that you spent all this money, but you can't make it happen. You have integrators who over-implement. So I don't know I can't speak for anyone in this audience, But how many times have you heard of situations where you hire an integrator, they go off for a long time, and they come back and they've delivered stuff that, like, you're like, well, but we're not ready to use that for 3 years. Or why'd you go off in that direction? Why weren't you paying attention to the fact that our executives said go left, not right? So you get that integration model where people, you think in terms of 6-month development cycles. That doesn't work anymore, right? We see collisions between teams. Right? One team says we're going left, the other team says we're going right, and the software is stuck in between. And it's not about the customer, right? We have clients, and I'll give you an example later, where it was 2 different teams, two different brands who wanted to do 2 completely different things and all meet at the website, right? All meet at a common website under one brand. It hasn't ever happened to you out there, has it? Right? Oh, and let's forget the fact that consumers want both of those products. So it's 2 different experiences under one brand. How many of you work with internal IT? Yeah? How well do they operate at the pace of marketing? Okay, how well do they operate at the pace of your financial systems? Not even there? Oh, okay. They're pretty slow and usual, right? The way that I would put it is they're optimized to reduce risk, right? But marketing is all about taking risks, right? I mean, you got to go out and test and throw things out there and try things and come back. That's not the IT model. And then finally we hear that there's just not enough focus on data, right? I was just talking to you about this, right? We don't get good data, but we know we still need to make decisions. Or I was on a call right before this. We have all the data in the world, but we can't get the teams to use it. We can't get the teams implementing the systems to use it, and we can't get the systems then to engage with the customers. So all these problems are happening. And when we go out and we've seen these, we wanted to learn from them, right? What does it mean when we do this? And so you could consider this like 3rd, 4th, 5th generation of being kicked in the head by the horse and finally going, okay, maybe we got to do something different. And so what we did is we created the value realization framework, right? I will not claim to be the expert in this. What I will claim to be is the guy who said, hey, this is really how we can think about how to help clients. This is the way Epsilon does it, but you all could take this back as well. And we'd be happy to share some of these tools because this is how we think about it. The first is that we got to have the right measurement. So if you're not starting from what you're trying to accomplish at the top, you're never going to get there, right? So is it corporate goals that then have to filter down to the marketing goal, that filter down to what you want to have accomplished with these tools? Then that's where you have to start. We need the right organizational structures. And I will be the first to say, we do not mean reorganizing the teams on the org chart. Yes, you might get there, but what's important is building out the right processes. Like, what's the process flow you need, and what do they have to do in order to get from A to B, right? So that you have clarity with the people. We need the right data, we need just enough technology, right? It's almost better to assume that you're gonna have some handwork initially than to over-implement the technology and have it sitting on the shelf. Because that's what we see when we get too much technology. The 2 critical things are we want to take a stepwise approach. And again, I was on this call and I'm saying, we need to be able to, with our client, go, we're not going to just take these giant steps, we're going to take these incremental steps, and at each one of those steps we want to be able to show what the impact is. It's not, we did these 3 tasks, it's because we did these 3 tasks, we are having this impact on this measurement, right? We're either reducing costs, we're driving better acquisition, we're driving better opens, we're driving more engagement, more time on site, more conversion. It's going to be something like that. And then finally, it's a roadmap and a business case. Because what we've found is that when you're involved in working in these projects, the most critical thing is to be able to tell others and executives what you're trying to do and what the impact is and why you've invested this money. And so what we do consciously is we're always trying to make sure that we can tie things back so that if our client or we have to talk upward or to another division, we have that business case in mind. So that when you roll this all together, we feel like this is an approach that actually does more to guarantee the success of a project and of an effort. And so the critical thing is to be both marketers and technologists. How many of you are actually technologists? Couple? How many are marketers? Okay. How often do you find that you don't speak the same language? Right? It happens, right? Well, the idea here is that we want to be somewhere in the middle. If you're a marketer, you need to be sensitive to what technology is trying to do and be critical about how much they're trying to do. And if you're a technologist, you need to be always focused on what's the impact going to be and can I get there in a quick way? So there are 4 elements to this that we look at. The first is we've got to focus on those marketing outcomes, right? If we're going to invest time, resources, dollars, we got to focus on an outcome. The second is we're going to mesh top down and bottom up. Again, what are the KPIs we're trying to drive, and then what has to happen with the technology, with the people, with the process, with the data, so that we can make that happen, right? It's not, we're going to implement AEM 6.3.5. It's, we need these features because it's going to play out in this way that's going to have this impact. And by the way, that means we're going to have to change the way that our program managers are dealing with this and the way that our marketing teams are dealing with the content. So let's make sure we're thinking about that holistically. We're going to be deliberate about that stepwise approach, and then we're going to apply the technology. We're not going to let the technology lead, right? And that's often hard because there's a lot of money associated with the technology. But that's the critical piece, is that we want to make sure that we're using the technology as an enabler. So what does it mean in terms of how we approach engagements? Well, we use a set of tools. Actually, I shouldn't say tools. One of our technologists told me that implies certain things that we're going to give you and it's just going to work out of the box. They're not. These are approaches. These are ways of thinking, right? We do a structured discovery, right? That is something everyone can do, but it means you do it holistically, right? Let's be structured about it. Let's make sure that we get to all of the issues. Let's make sure that we're doing up, for the stakeholders, for the customers, for the internal suppliers, and bring that together. We do simultaneous road mapping, right? Have you seen this in any of your, who's seen a simultaneous roadmap in your accounts, where in your teams, where you're not only doing a strategic view, but you're also doing the tactical views and then bringing them together? Why? Because you want to stay to that North Star, but you want to make sure you're having impact. And so our team, this is a tool that we use because then we can find the best way to bring things together. We do incremental work packages. Now, from a business perspective, that makes sense because clients often find it easier to give us a little bit of money rather than a lot of money, but it also plays into that stepwise approach too, right? So that there's the, we'll prove it to you at every step, just like we're telling you that's how you should approach the project. We go through a rationalization analysis where we look at the things that are both complex and difficult against the return, so that with our clients or with your internal teams, you can see, oh, we're biting off something that's really hard versus we're biting off something that's easy but doesn't have return. So it starts to allow you to kind of sort through and figure out how to address the biggest impact things when you're doing that. We do org and process analysis. Again, I can't reiterate it. Adobe's a great tool, but if you don't think about how it's going to be used, if you don't think about what you're asking the teams to do, if you don't walk that through as deliberately as you do a technology evaluation, your chance of success just went way down. So it's about thinking, process, and people from the beginning, right? And again, so you don't hit any third rails, the electric third rail. You don't want to always be talking about it in terms of an org chart, because that, we find that that's when you step on the landmine internally. It's not about who reports to who has how many people or anything like that. It's about what do I need to have happen with my teams to get the right process to happen to get the right outcomes. The org chart will sort itself out. And then we have actually built tools inside Adobe. How many of you have heard of Adobe Project? Anyone? Do you use it? Anyone use it? Exactly. Why? Because it's like anything, right? If you're not given, if it's not purpose-built for what you're trying to accomplish, it's like having a spreadsheet. You know, okay, I got a tool that can do all this data analysis. I don't know how to do that. We actually built a process and project tracking tool inside Adobe for our clients, right? So that they can see at a dashboard level what the progress is while we're working on things, and a lot of our projects are you know, teamed up with clients. They can go in, they can double click in, they can ask questions, it can train their teams how to take over for us. And so together, this is how we tend to think about it, is we have these tools. And like I said, there's nothing, the process and the intellectual property behind them is something that we're happy to share, right? Because we believe philosophically this is how you succeed. So let me give you a couple of examples where we've taken this approach and broken through kind of a traditional problem. So I mentioned multiple brands going to market under the same brand. So you can imagine this, right? I go to a bank and I have a checking account, and I go to a bank and I have a loan, and I go to a bank and I want to have my credit cards, right? 3 different divisions inside a bank, all wanted to control their user interface, all wanted to control their technology stack, all wanted to control everything. And we came in, and the way we were able to do this was, again, we started with that top down. What are you trying to accomplish? And it turned out that what they were trying to do is they're trying to maximize the value of a given customer, right? That isn't about a particular line of business. And so we were actually able to act as a neutral arbiter and keep bringing people back to you're trying to do this across your customers, right? And that we were able to do that market-in approach. And then we didn't tell IT that they couldn't operate. It was just natural that they were forced to come along. And over time, the degree of, let's call it a common CX, a common customer experience, just started happening naturally, right? Because if you start at the beginning, then the natural thing next is, well, then how do I lay out within those businesses? And guess what? It increased dramatically, besides a better customer experience, the cross-sell. Because suddenly, when you're on one person's site, and they can start marketing the other products, and it's seamless rather than looking like 3 different companies. So the outside in really mattered here. In this case, we also had a case of multiple brands, but the bigger issue in healthcare is that people are getting their information from a variety of different sources, right? Where do you get information about a drug? Your doctor, right? So we got to make sure the doctor has the information. Where else do you get it? How many have gone on WebMD? Right? You get it online, right? My wife has some kind of, she got a bug bite and it got infected, and now she thinks it's eczema, and she's doing what everyone else does, which is, okay, I'm going to look online for what this could possibly be before I can get to the dermatologist, right? So she's going through every potential thing that it could be, and every potential symptom, and every potential cure or treatment, right? All online, because of course this happens last night, and she can't get into the doctor till tomorrow. Well, this is a problem that this client needs to serve. They offer up a drug, and they need to make sure that the information, not just on their website, but everywhere that it gets sourced, is common, right? They need to make that their salespeople have that same information. So you've got all of these audiences in that chain that have to be consistent. And again, everyone wants to have their own path to market, right? But luckily, we were able to find someone who got that 360-degree view of the consumer, right? And so we found that champion. So one thing that you can do is you can find people in your organizations that actually get it and really work closely with them as the anchor for how this should work. And so what it did is we were able to, remember I said we build a business case and a roadmap? We were able to arm this champion, not just with, hey, we should have this 360-degree view, but we were able to arm them with a multi-year roadmap that was linked to the investments they were going to make and the impact that they could expect to see. And that got the executive buy-in. So it was a very, very big deal. This is one of the largest pharma companies in the world. So you can imagine how difficult and political that kind of environment would be. Here's an example of a case where we were working with a client, another multi-brand client, and they decided that our approach was too expensive, right? So, hey, we have all these tools, right? So that must cost a lot of money for you to implement them and use them, right? It must cost, you're taking too long. This is just way too much. We think we should be able to get this for less. And so they went to bid, and they found a traditional systems integrator who said that they would do it for 40% less. We're like, okay, well, see you later. I mean, we maintained a nice relationship. Well, remember, we're talking about incremental, and it's not like we come back and we rebid every time, right? I mean, that's just a bad business relationship, a bad partnership. If every time you walk through another door, there's another bill, right? You work that through in the partnership. What happened was they walked through that door and went, oh, well, here's your change order, right? Because you came back and said, well, the priorities have now gone about 20 degrees left. So we want to, instead of doing A and B, we want to do A and C. We want to do C first, and then we'll try and go back to B. And that first change order brought their cost up to where we were before. So our idea was, they came back to us, and our stakeholder, instead of now being cost-centric, actually said, okay, I get it. I'm going to go around. You're going to help me build those relationships with all my stakeholders. So that cost wasn't the issue. It was effectiveness. And you can do that in internal projects as well. And then finally, there are times where we do this before the client even touches the software. This was an RFP, where the RFP was for Adobe, right? And we went in and we said, well, yeah, you listed features, but what are you trying to accomplish? And so, we went in and we were bidding as an Adobe partner and all that, but our goal was, let's make this about the experience you're trying to create for your visitors, right? You want them to go through a different journey, and we presented 5 different journeys for 5 different kinds of visitors. And guess what? That approach is what got them to change the way that they went with the RFP. Because they started to realize that it's not the technology, it's how they have to apply it. And they needed those other 5 things thought through, right, before they should actually think about the technology. Because really, they could have used any technology, right? What they needed was, what are we going to ask our marketing teams to do? What are we going to ask our IT teams to do? What is it that we really want to accomplish for the consumer who's going to engage with our brand? And once they did that, they rewrote the RFP. So, the benefits of thinking beyond the software. You get a lot of benefits, right? You get the balance between people, process, and technology by taking this approach, right? I can guarantee, whether you're a technologist, a marketer, or an executive, if you start to talk like this inside your company, you're going to have more credibility, right? You will. You're going to be able to deliver proof points in an interim basis, right? Meaning you don't have to say, yeah, we're about 50% of the way through our project and we'll get back to you. No, you're going to be able to credibly say, we're already moving these dials. It means you get to bring that broader experience that you have. So you're in marketing, right? This is not a technology play. This is a how are we transforming the business? How are we having impact on the market? It ensures that data is going to inform things at each point. So yeah, I want to use, I have a lot of marketing experience. I want the art in part of it, but I should be able to use data that I have to inform that, or have the teams inform that. So the technology needs to be part of how that becomes part of the system. It's not just the data, it's the analytics, it's the insights that you have that then can adjust the way you use that technology. And then finally, it's really about using Adobe or whatever technology to transform the way you're going to market. So in the situation you've got these disconnected pieces, right? How can we think about that and make that more holistic? So that yes, maybe they're still disconnected, but at least the data flows, or at least the insights flow, or at least, right, and you start to make those steps forward. The other thing I want to leave you with is that, so, you know, you could take a leap of faith, and you could say that this is an interesting approach. You could say some of those tools look interesting, but the way I'm going to give you a proof point of this, that this works, is not just that we have some happy clients. It's that we've actually taken this to heart internally inside Epsilon. Because we've taken this approach, we've identified a minimum of 4 new things that we go to market with, that for different size clients and for different kinds of clients, because we took this approach. So the first is, how many of you have Creative Cloud as well as, right? Okay, so you probably have a DAM. Maybe you have a DAM. Maybe you just have a little database that you store content in, right? How well is it connected? How well do you connect the people or your agencies who are doing creative work with how it gets through the system and gets used and put up on whatever channel you're thinking of putting it on? Pretty badly, in our experience, right? I heard it's 0 back there. How about being able to give feedback to the creative people, whether they're an agency or your teams, on what's working, what's not, and what got used? Pretty low values. So we actually have a solution called multi-cloud orchestration, where it's all about content velocity and usage. And we've built the tools and built the processes so that we can actually link these together, right? Some of it, for some of the clients doing it, it's pretty rudimentary. For some now, they're pushing the bounds. Because when you're talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars on creative, you need to know what's working and what's not. And in a lot of cases, you don't want to create, you know, all 50 or 80 different versions of a particular piece of content, all the ad sizes, all of the different sizes for email, for mobile, for everything, if it's not going to work. Or if you find out that it only works in a particular channel for a particular audience. So that's what that's about. The second is, how many of you have loyalty systems or are members of loyalty programs? Okay, I bet it's more than that. I know you, Carl. You're a member. So Adobe is great at customer experience, right? They believe in the experience economy. Where is their Achilles heel? How do those experiences evolve over time, right? How do I manage customer interaction over time? How do I know that you were part of, you engaged with me, and the experience you want to have next year is different than the one you had before, right? And I know that because you've come back a couple of times and I've gotten data about that. Well, what our loyalty program does is, yes, we can run a points-based system, but it's also about understanding customers from the context of how long or how good a customer they are, and then being able to find lookalikes and bring other people along. It's so important that Adobe has actually co-branded this, and you can get this from your Adobe from Adobe directly, and we're working with them through the Amplify program on that. A third one is what we call Unite, which is how do we manage identity, right? The problem we were talking about. What's a household, and does that matter? How do I track that these members of the household are underage and shouldn't be marketed to or don't have the right to actually be a decision maker? How do I know that it's a household when the husband and wife have different names, right? All these sorts of things are just the complexities, along with, as Carl pointed out in his presentation, how many devices do they have? How many different places have they engaged? Have they bought things? What do they do when they're not interacting with your brand? That's Unite, and we've been able to realize that that's an incredibly powerful thing to feed into the Adobe engine. And then finally, we have a product called View 24/7, which was taking all that data and actually making next generation insights into it. Things like, which segment should I invest in and shouldn't I? Right? If I'm going to build individual experiences, but I can't do content or anything for all of them, which ones should I target for diving deeper into and investing more? So these are just benefits that came to Epsilon. I mean, obviously clients who use these get benefit, but my point was these tools have real value because they bring insights into the how you're doing things, not just the what. And so I'll leave you with the 4 thoughts, right? Be thinking about marketing outcomes, right? Try and link what you're doing or what your project teams are doing or what your partners are telling you to do Ask them to bring it back to what's that going to do? And if you're not satisfied with the answer, just keep asking. But focus on the outcome. Mesh the top down and bottom up. You know what your businesses are trying to accomplish. Right? I talked last night to a university, right? And they're like, well, yeah, we're nonprofit. I'm like, yes, but you know what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to get more students, right? And you want these students to finish. So you've got to get acquisition and you've got to get retention, right? Loyalty, right? At least for the period while they're getting their degree. And then you want them to be advocates. So that top-down exists even in nonprofits. We want to take that deliberate step-by-step approach, and then again, Adobe's a great tool, but don't let it wag the dog, right? You want to be in charge of what's happening with these projects and make sure you know why you're using that tool and moving forward.